TM-46, the Soviet Union's most famous anti-tank mine. An expert NATO analysis. Introduction. Throughout the Cold War, the Soviet Union developed an enormous array of landmines designed to blunt the NATO technological advantage in armored warfare. Among these weapons, the TM-46 anti-tank mine became one of the most widely recognized and deployed. It was not the most advanced, nor the most sophisticated, but it epitomized the Soviet doctrine of mass production, rugged simplicity, and battlefield saturation. For NATO forces, the TM-46 was a constant presence in training manuals, field intelligence reports, and operational encounters from Vietnam to Afghanistan. Even decades after its first appearance in the late 1940s, it remains lethal on battlefields and post-conflict zones worldwide. As a NATO weapons specialist, this essay aims to provide a detailed technical, tactical, and strategic analysis of the TM-46. It explores the mine's design, operational use, global proliferation, and its long-lasting humanitarian impact. Ultimately, the TM-46 demonstrates how the simplest devices can achieve global notoriety through sheer ubiquity and effectiveness. 1. Historical background. The development of the TM-46 cannot be separated from the broader context of post-World War II Soviet strategy. The Red Army had experienced firsthand the devastating impact of German Teller mines and other anti-tank devices. During the war, Soviet industry rushed to produce its own equivalents, such as the TM-35 and TM-41, but these designs were often crude and inconsistent. By the end of the war, Soviet engineers recognized the need for a standardized, reliable anti-tank mine that could be mass-produced for decades. The TM-46 was born out of this requirement. Officially introduced in 1946, hence the designation, it represented a leap forward in standardization. Its design owed much to the German Teller Mine 42 and Teller Mine 43, but with simplified Soviet modifications. Over time, the TM-46 became the baseline Soviet anti-tank mine, later improved in the TM-57 and TM-62 families, but never fully retired. 2. Technical characteristics. Physical specifications. Shape: circular, flat metal-cased mine. Diameter: approximately 305 millimeters. Height: 128 millimeters. Weight: 8.6 kilograms. Explosive charge: around 5.7 kilograms of TNT, sometimes Amatol or TG50 in later versions. Fuse system. The primary fuse was the MV5 pressure fuse. Key features included activation pressure, 120 to 450 kilograms, depending on soil conditions and fuse settings. Mechanism. A pressure plate depresses under the weight of a vehicle, crushing a shear pin, releasing the striker, and initiating the detonator. Anti-handling. The basic TM-46 lacked sophisticated anti-handling devices, though the TM-46 variant added anti-handling features to counter clearance attempts. Effectiveness. The explosive charge was sufficient to destroy light armored vehicles outright, immobilize main battle tanks by blowing off tracks or damaging suspension, inflict heavy psychological impact on armored crews who knew that even survival often meant abandonment of immobilized vehicles under fire. Detectability. The large steel body made the TM-46 relatively easy to locate with metal detectors, unlike later plastic case designs. However, its simplicity and the Soviets' habit of deploying mines in massive numbers still made clearance operations costly and time-consuming. 3. Tactical employment. The TM-46 was integrated into Soviet and Warsaw Pact defensive doctrines in multiple ways. Minefields. Large anti-tank minefields laid in depth along likely NATO armored avenues, mixed with anti-personnel mines such as POMZ-2 or PMN-1 to deter clearance by infantry engineers. Often combined with barbed wire, ditches, and obstacles to channel vehicles into mined zones. Urban and rural use, buried on roads, choke points, and bridge approaches. Placed on tank-accessible terrain, especially open plains, which is precisely where NATO armored thrusts would occur. Psychological role. NATO after-action reports consistently noted the paralyzing psychological effect of TM-46 minefields. Crews often hesitated to advance without clearance, slowing down armored momentum, a key Soviet objective. 4. Operational history. The TM-46 became one of the most widely used anti-tank mines in modern warfare, appearing in dozens of conflicts. Vietnam War. Supplied in large numbers to North Vietnam, the TM-46 wreaked havoc on U.S. convoys and armored vehicles. Viet Cong guerrillas also improvised with TM-46 mines in ambushes, often reinforcing them with additional charges for greater effect. Arab-Israel wars. Egypt and Syria deployed TM-46 mines on a massive scale during the 1956, 1967, and 1973 wars. Israeli engineers documented thousands of TM-46 mines laid across the Sinai and Golan Heights. Soviet-Afghan War, 1979 to 1989. Ironically, Soviet forces themselves heavily relied on TM-46 mines against the Mujahideen supply routes. Decades later, many remain active, causing civilian casualties. Africa and the Middle East. The TM-46 appeared in Angola, Mozambique, Iraq, and countless insurgencies. Its simple design made it a staple of proxy wars, often supplied freely by Moscow. Post-Soviet conflicts. In Chechnya, Bosnia, Kosovo, and more recently Ukraine, TM-46 mines continued to appear. Some were used directly from Soviet stockpiles, others were improvised copies produced locally. 5. NATO assessment. From a NATO perspective, the TM-46 was classified as a serious but predictable threat. Strengths. Mass deployment, millions produced, meaning that NATO forces had to expect them in any Warsaw Pact engagement. High explosive content, enough to immobilize even NATO's heaviest tanks. Reliable and durable, operated across climates from deserts to Arctic conditions. Weaknesses. Easily detectable. Metal detectors quickly picked up TM-46 mines. Limited sophistication. No advanced anti-handling features in the base design. Obsolescence. By the 1960s, newer Soviet mines like the TM-57 and TM-72 offered more modern designs. Yet, the TM-46's weaknesses were offset by one overwhelming advantage: numbers. Clearing thousands of mines under combat conditions remained slow and dangerous, even if each mine individually was not advanced. 6. Humanitarian impact. The TM-46 continues to kill and maim civilians decades after its deployment. Durability. Steel casing protects TNT from environmental degradation. Accidents. Civilians driving tractors, buses, or trucks in Cambodia, Afghanistan, and Angola still detonate old TM-46 mines. Demining challenges. While detectable, clearance requires time and specialized equipment, resources often scarce in post-war societies. In humanitarian terms, the TM-46 has been responsible for thousands of civilian deaths long after wars ended. 7. Comparative analysis. Compared to German Teller mines, TM-46 was heavily inspired by German designs but simplified for Soviet production. Teller mines often had better anti-handling features. The TM-46 emphasized simplicity. Compared to NATO mines, U.S. M15 AT mine contained a larger charge but was more expensive to produce. NATO mines tended to be heavier, more sophisticated, but less widely distributed. Soviet evolution. The TM-46 directly influenced later designs. TM-57, improved, with better casing and anti-handling devices. TM-62, a family of modernized mines still widely in use. 8. Legacy. The TM-46 is not merely a weapon,
It is an icon of Soviet military doctrine. Its round metal casing is instantly recognizable, even to civilians who have seen photographs of Cold War-era minefields. For NATO, the TM-46 symbolized the attritional approach of Soviet warfare: deny terrain through vast minefields, slow enemy armor, and force costly clearance operations. Its legacy persists today, as mine clearance teams around the world continue to neutralize TM-46 mines laid decades ago. Excellent point to note that the TM-46 anti-tank mine represents the Soviet Union's most famous and widely distributed mine. It was not sophisticated, nor was it innovative, but it achieved something greater: ubiquity. For NATO, it was both a tactical hazard and a strategic obstacle.